In today's episode of James on IT, we're going to talk about multi-factor authentication in Microsoft 365 and Azure, and what's happening with the new enforcements that are coming down. Let's get started. So if you haven't heard, Microsoft is making changes for all of their administration panels as well as other areas over the next year or so, where they're going to start requiring multi-factor authentication when accessing various resources. The first area that they're going to be enforcing this in is for all the admin centers, and we're going to be talking about that in this video today. Maybe recently you've logged into your Azure portal or your Microsoft 365 portal, and you may have had this screen pop up. This is the multi-factor authentication screen. As you can see here, it's talking about the new enforcement. And this enforcement's starting here literally in just a couple of weeks, October 15th, 2024. All of the main portals for the admin centers, such as Azure, Entra, Intune, and others for the admin centers, are going to start enforcing multi-factor authentication. This means any admin account that can log in and access these portals, or any user account for that matter, any account period, will require multi-factor authentication. Now you can request, using this button down here, postpone enforcement, but this will only postpone it until March 15th, 2025. So if anything, it's a temporary band-aid at most. I can see larger environments needing that, but for the most part, if you're managing a smaller environment, this isn't a big deal. You may want to, however, audit your logins, and we'll get into showing how you can do that to see what needs and who's going to be needing this multi-factor authentication change, who's going to be affected by this change, I should say. And there's a couple steps that it shows here. It says, verify that all portal and admin centers users have multi-factor authentication set up. And all users have multi-factor authentication. If they are, then no further action is required. Then, if for those that don't, you need to set up multi-factor authentication. It takes you to this wonderful little shortened URL, aka MFA for Azure. If you go here, this document, it talks about how to plan for the various areas, and this is all the areas that's going to be affected. So here's what it's talking about for the Azure portal, Entra admin center, and Intune admin centers. And then early 2025, it's going to start requiring it for things such as Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell, the mobile app, as well as IAC tools. So if you run anything infrastructure as code, this is going to be hitting you as well. So I can see a lot of devs being affected by this. What it's going to require is using some type of multi-factor authentication, either using the Microsoft Authenticator on your phone, or you'll want to use something like a passkey. So what's a passkey? Well, a passkey is something like this. This is a YubiKey FIDO2 enabled passkey. This is a physical key that you plug into your computer and then you use to authenticate yourself. I have several of these YubiKeys. I use them for all my admin centers because it makes it so much easier. You plug it in, it's just like a key to your house. You have to have a physical key in order to be able to log in and authenticate yourself and make sure that you can access your portal. It makes it simple, it makes it easy, it's a no-brainer. However, these things cost money. You know, these things can run you anywhere from $25 for a basic one to as much as like $65. They get pretty expensive for what they do. And they run a very proprietary software on these in order to make them secure. And this is just one example. There's several different YubiKey-like devices out there, but this is one of the more popular ones. And you can pick up YubiKeys from any online retailer, honestly. If you look them up, you'll find them, and you can find one that'll work for you. But anyway, this is just one of many ways that you can have MFA. I personally recommend the physical key because this is something you physically have to have on you. And if you do use a FIDO key, like a YubiKey, then I highly recommend you don't buy one, buy like 3. That way you have one on you, and then you can have a spare, and you can lock that spare in a safe location, either in such a like a bank vault you can lock in there, or maybe if you have a safe at home that's fireproof, or where have you. You need a separate one that you don't carry around with you. Now see, for me, I have several. I've got ones that I have plugged into my work computer. I've got one that I keep on my personal, and then I have spares that I have locked away in safe places. That way, if I ever lose one or have a problem, I can go in, because you can name all these devices, which is nice. I can go in, kick those out, the one that I lost out, and my account's completely secure. And it makes it so much easier to log in. But enough about passkeys. Let's get back into this Azure enabling multi-factor. So let's jump back into our browser here. You can read through this if you want. Like I see the URL here, aka.ms/MFA for Azure. Take a look at it, it's great. But today, let's talk about how easy it is to actually enforce our multi-factor authentication. I want to show you 2 ways of getting to this. First off, if you're within Azure, you can go to your Microsoft Entra, as you can see here. So now that we're in our Entra, we can actually go in to the Entra management, and we can change things such as our multi-factor authentication. Now, if you go in this way, you'll want to go to this security where you have the blue shield. This pulls up things for like your documentation on how to set up things like conditional access. We're actually going to look at some of my conditional access policies I have set up temporarily, and that way you can see how to easily set this up. Now, once we get into our conditional access, we go to policies, and here you'll see that I've already got some policies set up, and we're going to walk through some of these, and I've changed some. That way it shows how this works, but it's very, very simple. Conditional access, let's talk a minute about conditional access, just so you know. Microsoft allows you to set up conditional access, or something called a conditional access policies, that allows you to log in to your Microsoft tenant or services that you have, and it has to set a specific set of rules. So for example, if you have an office that's address never changes, and you want them to be able to log in from that office, and only that office, you can set up a conditional access policy that people can only log in from that source IP, and during this time frame, like business hours, and that's it. You can set up where you block things like ability to log in from China or North Korea or any other suspicious countries. If you are fully here in the United States, set up a policy that says you can log in from nowhere but the United States. Or if you're in certain offices, those IPs, which ones can be trusted. However, you got to be careful, because with conditional access, you can actually lock yourself out of your own tenant. So always keep a backup way into your tenant and test before you push out. And let me show you how we do this. So back in our policies, as you see, we've got a bunch of test policies in here I've been tinkering with, but the beautiful part is Microsoft made this easy. This new policy from template. If we click on this, it brings up some templates that we can easily apply conditional access, and it makes it so easy. So for example, remember how that requirement is to have multi-factor authentication for admin centers? Right there. You click on this, hit review, recreate, and that allows you to set up your multi-factor for Azure management. What about the other admin centers? Well, if we go in here to protect administrator, require multi-factor authentication for admins. So if you enable this, then it pulls all admins that are in your tenant. It will require multi-factor authentication for them. Also, you have Azure management that we just saw on that other screen, but it follows here because this goes into the protect administrator section. It allows you to set up for the Azure management But here's your other one, multi-factor authentication from Microsoft admin portals. So let's go ahead and we'll click on this one. Remember how that requirement for October 15th is for admin portals? There's our policy. We can fix this real quick. If we hit review and create, it shows us, okay, here's all the roles for all the administrators, and we're going to require multi-factor authentication. Now, the nice part about this is here's where you get to test. You have 3 sections. You can turn a policy completely off where it doesn't run at all. You can turn it on where it's enabled immediately, or you can set it to report. Now, if you set it to report, it's only going to show you, hey, here's who's going to be hit and infected by this policy, but it doesn't enforce anything. So I always recommend when testing your policies, especially any new policy, put it in report mode, test it out. And you'll see here, if we go back to our conditional access policies, we've got some that are actually turned on. So I've got it for my admins, for my admin portals, and for Azure management are all on. For the rest of these, I have report only. Now, if I wanted to, for example, let's say for guest access, I want to turn that on. I simply click on it, click it on, and hit save. Now, once I do that, now this policy, if I have a guest user try and access anything in my little demo tenant here, it's going to require multi-factor authentication for them. Now, what you'll notice here is I've got several, these are all templates that I'm using from this policy template. These are all Microsoft templates. This is the easiest way to set up a nice secure environment. It's not going to be like Fort Knox secure, but this is a great way to start your security for your Microsoft 365 and Azure environments. Things such as blocking legacy authentication, making sure your Azure management, admin portals, admins, enforce it for all users, blocking risky sign-ins, and then requiring phishing resistant multi-factor authentication. Let's talk about a few of these. First off, you'll see this one, block access for unknown or unsupported device platform. Now, this policy, what it does is any device that's basically not in Intune, or it's not known to the system, it's not managed by Azure. So it could be a person's home device, it could be a guest computer, something unknown to the network, it's going to block that access. Block legacy authentication. Let's talk about this one for a minute. You may be using legacy authentication through various services, such as printers are great for this. They're a great example of how not to do security. Then you have ones like, there's a lot of web apps that still use legacy authentication methods. This will block those. And so I highly recommend, make sure you have this on report. That way you can see these. Require compliant or hybrid Azure AD joined. Well, this kind of works together with this. So this means only devices that are in Intune that are compliant with the security standards or hybrid joined. In other words, they know about it through the local Azure, they know about it through the local Active Directory environment, then, and that's being synced up into Azure, and they know it's compliant, then only those devices are allowed for login. And this affects all users. So when you enable this, if their computers are not up to spec and compliant, they're going to get blocked. They won't be able to log in. You're going to get blocked if you're on a computer that's not compliant. And you can see which computers are compliant by going into your Intune devices, and you can see right there. And that goes into your other policies. We'll probably have more videos on that in the near future, but understand that's how that goes. And that's why I recommend this and report only, at least starting out until you get used to it. Ones I definitely recommend you should turn on: anything Azure management, admin portals, and admins. That should be on regardless, does not matter. Turn it on. You need, for any admin, you need to have multi-factor authentication enabled. Otherwise, someone can steal your credentials, get access to your environment, and do all kinds of horrible things. Make sure your admins, your most precious access, is well protected. And honestly, I even recommend, I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a minute, I even recommend you set aside, for even for the smallest environments, buy just an inexpensive low-end computer for this, because all it is going to be doing management. Set that up separately with all your security. Make sure it's in tune. Make sure you have your antivirus up to date. Make sure Windows is fully up to date, and only use that computer to access your Microsoft 365 Admin Center, your Azure portal, your own any Active Directory server, things like that. You want a secure computer where you can manage at an administrative level your environment. Do not use your daily user as your admin account. That is such horrible way of keeping your environment secure, because it essentially, that means if you accidentally click on a phishing link, they just stole your credentials. They're logging in. They're doing all kinds of horrible things to your environment. So make sure you protect your most precious users, and that is your admins, because they're the most privileged. You have to protect those. Now, if you can't do that, you can use a virtual system for that, like a virtual PC or a virtual server. I know some that have done that, where you remote into those using a completely separate account from your admin account, and then use that. Just keep in mind, the more layers that you put in place, the more steps the bad guy has to take in order to gain access to that. And don't use your admin account for anything but the management. And that way you can have, for your everyday driver account, just set it up as a normal user. You don't need privileged access for anything for what you do, like email and stuff. Let your admin account be separate from your local account. That's what I'm getting to. That's best security practice. That's what you need to do. All right, I'm getting off my soapbox. Let's get back into this. Your risky sign-ins. I love turning risky sign-ins on. Now, I've got it on report only in this instance in my little demo environment. But this multi-factor authentication for risky sign-ins, if Microsoft suddenly detects an account that's logged in too quick from a geographically different area, or maybe sees it going through a VPN, or it's a new login from a new location, it can hit the risky sign-ins. And because you have this, if you have this enabled, it will require more than just a password to log in. And then lastly, your phishing resistant multi-factor. Now, your phishing resistant multi-factor, that goes down into using certificates and your physical keys. Now, that way, the reason these are phishing resistant is because a phishing email can't steal my key. What it's going to do instead, it could steal my password. It could steal my code. Matter of fact, there's all kinds of man-in-the-middle attacks for multi-factor for SMS. It can even do for your Microsoft Authenticator. I've seen people get tricked into giving them their code, because they'll perform what's called a man-in-the-middle attack, where you're thinking you're logging into Microsoft, but you're actually logging in through their portal into Microsoft. So they're capturing all that data, and you're basically giving them access in. Well, with something like a physical key, they still don't get access because they need the key in order to authenticate. So making sure that that's turned on is really good for your admins, really important. So in summary, I know I kind of went off on a tangent there today, and my apologies, but I want to make sure you understand conditional access policies. We only touched the bare minimum of these conditional access policies. You can do so much more, but start with the templates. If this is new to you, create some templates, set them up in report only. Make sure that you have your MFA enabled, and before October 15th, that way you're not surprised by that change. And make sure that you use secure methods for multi-factor authentication. We're going to probably have more videos on how to set up and manage multi-factor authentication, but at least this gets you started. Once you enable this and you go to log in for the first time, Microsoft will walk you through setting up your MFA. Now, if you don't use Microsoft 365 or Azure, and I don't care what you use, you should still be using some type of multi-factor authentication. I highly recommend some type of physical key for your devices. Don't ever use SMS. Make sure you use something like certificates, good. Passkeys are fantastic. Use your password manager to help you manage those passkeys. Don't ever use them in a browser. That's a great way to get your password stolen, your passkeys stolen. And you can always use something such as your Microsoft Authenticator for your login as well, because you can have that as a secure way to log in, because with it now, it requires you to type in a code. That's not considered phishing resistant, as Microsoft points out, but it's better than nothing. It's a whole lot better than something like SMS, which is unencrypted and easily stolen. So be careful out there. Have fun. Enjoy setting up MFA, because you're going to need to learn how to love it. And it's important for you as an admin to protect yourself, especially your privileged accounts. But also it's good security hygiene regardless, especially in your personal life, because you don't want your information stolen from anywhere if you can help it. So I really hope you enjoyed our video today. Please remember to like and subscribe and follow us for more, and we'll see you in the next one.